All right, good morning. We are live. How's it going, Sophia?
It's going great. I can't complain, man. Life is good. Now let me stop.
Life
How y'all
is
doing?
glorious. We're doing gloriously.
Because I know
Yeah,
it's two of y'all, so
it's what?
it's two of you. That's why I said, how y'all doing?
Oh, yeah. I'm trying to stream to Facebook, but it looks like it's not working. I got to figure
It's still
that
not
out.
working?
I don't think so. So I guess I'll have to figure that
Okay, well,
out one day. Yeah. But yeah, man, we're gonna get into the consciousness conversation part 2. We did the first part last weekend, and we had to cut it abruptly because of some shit that came up on my end. But yeah, we'll keep it going. We'll react to a video with Alex O'Connor regarding consciousness, and also Sadhguru, who is a mystic who discusses the same thing and how it all intersects with science and philosophy and stuff like that. So, yeah, we'll get right into it then. All right, welcome back to the Mirror Point, where reality is checking itself. And we are going to be reacting to a few things here regarding consciousness and idealism, physicalism, epistemology, philosophy. And I thought we would maybe do a little quick reaction to a few segments here on this new Alex O'Connor video. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it or not. It came out like I think yesterday. I didn't see the whole thing, but I saw a little bit of it and thought it would make good content for the show. Did you get a chance to look at any of that, Sophia?
Hell no.
Okay,
I'm bad
well,
at that. I'm sorry.
No, that's good. It's all good. People like true reactions, because when you're first seeing something, that's when you have a true reaction, right? So that's the whole point.
Right. I figured
You know what I mean?
I figured I'll just react to it while we're going through it, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, I got to stop the videos from time to time so that the stream doesn't get, cut off. So I'm going to be doing that. We'll comment on sections as we get through it, but I'll go ahead and start. No time for the delay. Let's go ahead and get the party started.
Alternatives you might have heard of. So like the many worlds interpretation is another competitor for an interpretation of the data. The reason why we sort of need to treat all of these different options as real is because they are real, and not in the sense that there's a cloud of probability, but in the sense that there are almost infinitely many different branches of reality. It's not a multiverse, like strictly speaking, sort of little blobby universes in some ether somewhere. It's like every time a thing can happen, reality kind of splits off into all of these different possibilities. I spoke to David Deutsch at length about this. He's very confident that this is the real nature of reality. But the thing I'm trying to get across is that this calculation approach is what mathematicians and physicists do so well and do so brilliantly, is they come up with incredible mathematical systems that describe the universe and which can be used to do wonderful things. But that doesn't mean we've actually understood the nature of things. I always like to point to the example of Isaac Newton, because quantum mechanics is a bit complicated. Keeping it more simple, Newton discovers gravity, right? It is worth reflecting on what it is that Newton actually discovered. People knew that objects fell to the ground long before Newton did, right? The question is, well, what's going on here, And Newton famously kind of looks at the moon and thinks, is the moon also falling? And he, brilliantly answers, yes, it is. And he suddenly realizes that actually what's happening is the moon is constantly falling towards the Earth but it's just missing the Earth because it's moving sideways. And so it kind of keeps falling towards it, but missing it, and falling towards it and missing it. And that's how you get orbit. And so Newton realizes that the same thing that keeps the planets in orbit is the same thing that makes objects fall to the ground. And then he sets about mathematically describing this. And he comes up with the inverse square law. You know, the further something is away, if it's 2 times as far away, then it's, you know, whatever, minus 4 times as strong, this strength. And he says there's this thing called gravity, which is the label he gives to whatever this thing is that's keeping all of this together, right? And brilliant. And now we can send rockets to the moon. Awesome. Thank you, Newton. But Newton, as I like to point out, explicitly in the Scholium to the 2nd edition of the Principia Mathematica, writes, as for what this gravity thing is, hypothesis non fingo, he writes. I frame no hypothesis. He's saying he doesn't know. He doesn't know what gravity is. He doesn't, like, he's just sort of coming up with a mathematical description and think.
So I'm going to pause it here just for a second. So basically he's saying scientists, I'm getting out of it so far, I didn't see this part, but I guess he's saying scientists are really just describing the appearance of reality as how it appears to us rather than what it actually is, right?
Right, but he did say that he expressed it mathematically, right? So how did he come to those conclusions, and how did he come up with the math equation? That's what I want to know.
Right. Good question. Let's keep on going.
Because at first I thought it sounded like someone that hit the blunt. Because he's like,
yeah,
I wonder why things fall. And then he looked at the moon and he said, is the moon falling too? That sounds like somebody.
True.
Well, if we just treat it as though there is this force that works in this mathematical way, everything works, right? And guess what? It does. But most people know, at least to some degree, that Newton was wrong, right? Because Einstein comes along and like a century later and is like, however long later, and says, actually, that's not what gravity is. It's a bending of space-time kind of thing. So Newton's maths worked, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be glad that he had this system, which when treated as though true, allowed us to do all kinds of stuff. But it wasn't actually accurate in terms of describing the nature of the universe. And I think a lot of what's happening in like quantum mechanics, and this is uncontroversial, by the way, this isn't like me coming in and saying you quantum fit. Like a lot of people will say this. I'll be like, yeah, I mean, that's all we're doing is we're sort of mathematically trying to model the world, and that's fine. But if you're a philosopher, you're going to want to know, well, what's actually happening, not just how to describe it. And of course, as you said as well, it means that scientists are only really telling you what things do. They're not telling you what things are. At the most fundamental level, at least, a scientist just doesn't really have the lexicon to tell you what a thing actually is.
So like, yeah, that's a problem. Like how would philosophers determine that? Like, how do you determine what something is?
Or anyone for that matter.
Yeah, anybody. How would you really prove it? Like
we can give names to things, but
yeah,
we call the moon. What is the moon? It's a planet, but it's all stuff that we name it. Do we really know what it is and why it's there?
Yeah, you had a really, really cool video that you put up the other day, and I watched it, and you brought up something I didn't think about for a while. It was really cool. You were talking about phenomena versus noumena.
Yeah, I said that wrong as shit. I said phenomena and I couldn't even pronounce that.
Noumena.
Sorry.
I think you said noumena. But yeah, it's noumena. But the point is, you pointed at something really interesting, because you said that we can all talk about phenomena and we can all agree on what we're observing in our phenomenon, like the phenomenon of the moon or whatever. We can all intersubjectively point to it and call it a moon, and call it a day. But then again, when we start talking about the noumena, we're talking about that thing behind the phenomena that we don't have access to. And that's
But we do.
where, but yeah,
Not
we
all
do.
the time, but
Yeah. So that kind of relates to what he's talking about, you think?
I guess it sort of does, because he's talking about how things appear and how we describe them, right? But like I said in my video, if we go by the myth that says only what we see with the eyes and what can be measured is real, then, you know, it's been proven that throughout evolution, the organisms that did that, right, didn't survive. There's always an underlying reality. That's what I like to call it. There's always something more going on, something more than what meets the eye. That was my whole point. And, you know, we can say, yeah, this is what we see objectively, but we could still be wrong about what's really going on. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of what he's saying too.
Yeah. It kind of makes you feel humble. Like you shouldn't be too cavalier about what things are, you know. Like we have to understand our interface. Our consciousness is like an interface. So,
well,
anyway.
I would say the physical reality is.
Yeah, the physical reality as it appears, kind of like an interface.
Yeah.
But anyways, let me see. Keep it going here.
So even if you ask them a trivial question like, you know, what is a
if you're trying to stay lean and jacked and
athletic,
from
upgraded
the comfort
to the
of your
premium
own home, I have something
money,
game-changing.
a table made out of, they might tell you, well, it's made out of wood. And that's all very well and good. But if you don't know what wood is, then you're going to ask them, well, what's wood? And they're going to describe some kind of chemical composition, which I do not know. And then you ask them, yeah, but what's that? What is that thing? What is that made out of? They say, oh, well, it's made out of atoms. Okay, what's that? Well, protons and electrons. Okay, well, like, what is an electron? Well, it's kind of a fundamental particle. Okay, but like, what is it? Well, it's a negatively charged particle. Okay, what's negative charge? They'll tell you what it does. They won't tell you what it is. They and not out of, you know, not out of spite or anything. They just can't. All of the fundamental physical sort of qualities of the world, mass, charge, all that kind of stuff, are all defined in terms of what they do. Like mass is often defined in terms of resistance to acceleration, which is like, cool, but what is it? You know, what, like I can touch it. It's here. Like, what is this stuff that I'm engaging with right now? I'm not engaging with resistance to acceleration. Well, I am, because if I push this microphone, it resists acceleration a bit. Okay, that's useful. Cool, I can use that. But what is it? What is the thing that's resisting acceleration? And science just doesn't have the language to answer that. And that's not to say that we've got this like spooky supernatural thing going on. It's just to say that when the scientific method decided that mathematics is the language of the universe, as Galileo famously had it, it basically just like a priori just ruled out the existence or truth of anything which cannot be described mathematically. I think there are definitely things that can't be described mathematically, in particular when it comes to consciousness. I don't think you can capture consciousness in the language of science and maths. So you've kind of got two options. You either say Galileo was right, and therefore consciousness, I guess, just either doesn't exist or is somehow reducible to the physical stuff of the universe. Or you say, no, there's nothing like spooky or like weird about consciousness. It's just another thing that exists in the universe. But Galileo was wrong to say that the scientific method is the way to approximate it. Now, people will say, I'm going on a bit of a rant here. People will say, okay, but like, when can you ever say what something is? You know, all we need is to say what things sort of do, and that allows us to sort of navigate the universe. Yes, if you're a scientist, in the same way that if I was talking to a chess grandmaster, and I sort of lift and slightly adapt this example from my friend Philip Goff, if I was talking to a chess grandmaster and I wanted to learn how to win chess, right? So I say, like, what is a chessboard made out of? And he goes, well, it's made out of, you know, pawns and major pieces and minor pieces. Okay, cool. Well, what are major pieces made out of? What are major pieces? They're like bishops and horses, right? I think those are the.
I know.
Those are
We've
the major
played
ones.
chess
I always get
twice,
them-
and you completely thrashed me both times because I'm terrible at it.
Well, I should have looked this up beforehand. I'm pretty sure that the major pieces refers to like bishops and knights, maybe also rooks. I'm not sure. Anyway, and then you say, okay, well, what's a bishop? And as a chess grandmaster, the most helpful way you can answer and truthful way you can answer is, well, a bishop is a piece that only legally moves diagonally across the board. Okay, cool.
Yeah, but none of those things are scientific, though. I don't see how science or math is going to describe any of what he's talking about. Those are things that are relational. Like that would fall into the category of things science and math can't describe, right?
Like,
or am I wrong?
Because I thought that's what he's saying. I thought
Yeah,
that he's saying
what
that
he's saying, I guess.
science can't describe everything that's happening in reality, right? That's what he's saying, right?
But the move that's made is, since that's the case, then that just proves consciousness doesn't exist. Consciousness can't be real. It's like you were saying before. If science and math can't verify it, then it loses all meaning and it's nothing.
But what he's saying, the way I understood it is that he's saying that if the claim that science is making is true, then therefore consciousness wouldn't be able to exist. But that's only if you fit it into that frame, which is a false premise to begin with. So I think that's what he was saying.
Yeah, because even
or did I get that wrong?
Even if and we've been over that before, like even if any kind of framework or modeling happens, you have to be conscious to even do any of that stuff. So,
well, of course, if we define consciousness as being aware,
right,
having an experience, yes.
Exactly. Anyways, let me see. I'm probably getting all off track. I'm not understanding. Hold on.
And then I sort of say, yeah, but what is it? What is a bishop? You'd be like, well, what do you mean? Like, that's it. Like, we're playing chess. That's all a bishop is. It's defined by like what it does. You just play a game and this is how it moves. So okay, fine. And then I could play chess and I could win. And it doesn't matter what you use as a bishop. You could use, an AirPods case or something. And as long as you know the rules of how it moves, you can play chess. And that's great if you're a chess player. But if I'm that kid's dad who's trying to learn chess, and I'm a carpenter and I want to make him a chess set for his birthday. And so I go, hey son, what's that thing you're playing with? Oh, it's a chess set. Okay, well, can you just tell me what's it made out of?
Okay, so he's saying that question, what is it, depends on what approach or framework, like you said. Like,
exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
What matters is how it moves in order for you to be able to play chess within the framework of the chess game.
Right.
But how does that apply in a different frame? Within a different frame.
Yeah, different frame, because if you're framing it as like a carpentry type of thing, then talking about, the relative, role of the rook.
Talking about what it's made out of instead of how it moves.
He doesn't care about any of that. Yeah, that would make sense.
Right.
So he's going to tie this into science, I guess.
Like, oh, major pieces and minor pieces. Oh, cool. Oh, this bishop then. What's this bishop made out of? What are you talking about? Well, I mean, what literally, what's the stuff? Or what's the thing you're moving with your hand? Because I'd quite like to go and, build one for you. And the son goes, well, it's just a piece that moves diagonally legally. And he'd be like, okay, but I feel like you haven't fully answered my question here. And the son goes, no, but my grandmaster told me, like, that's all there is. That's all you need to know. It's like, that's true in the context of chess. And similarly, you maybe knowing what an electron does, knowing what, spin and charge and mass and all that kind of stuff does is all you need in the context of science, in the context of like practical reality, which in fairness is the reality that most people live in, so no problem. But if you are actually just still interested in what stuff really is made out of in the context of philosophy or metaphysics, I don't think it's enough, man. I want to know what's actually there.
All right. So he's saying that if you, and maybe that's where the whole breakdown of communication happens with people when we start talking about a lot of this stuff, is people are coming at it from different frameworks, you know?
Yeah. That's how I take it.
Yeah. So no wonder it's almost like you're always going to talk past each other, because people are going to say, well, what's your evidence of consciousness or this or that? And it's like, well, what are you looking for? Are you looking for some sort of particle or consciousness particle somewhere? Like, what are you talking about? You know, maybe we're talking about it from a metaphysical or an experiential point of view, a mystical point of view, which would be not very satisfying to someone who's approaching it from, you know, a physicalist or scientific point of view. It's never going to satisfy that question that way, and vice versa.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's good to know how things behave for practical use. Like he said, most of us live in the practical world, right?
Right.
But beyond that, you know, I guess we're asking what's behind it. Why is it there? What is it? You know?
Mm-hmm.
So we're just asking the deeper questions, and I guess a physicalist would say it doesn't matter. I don't know.
Right. Apparently, because all they care about is how things work, you know, how you can describe
for
it.
practical use.
So any other deeper question seems like nonsense to them, probably.
Or unimportant, or
Yeah.
I mean, that reminds me of how would I put this? Okay, I'm sorry that I have to use the example of a relationship, but it just, we're people. We have relationships and we
That's
relate
right.
to one another. So it's a good example, I guess. But like if you're in a relationship where everything seems good on the outside because practically it's all working, right? The bills are paid, everyone looks happy, the dogs and the cats are fed, whatever, right? Everything is practically working and functioning, right? But every night, two people are walking past each other. They don't speak with one another. They face in different directions when they go to bed at night. And we know intuitively there's something missing there, right? Even though practically it looks good, practically it's functioning. So what's missing, right? And what's missing is something that we really can't see, right? We call it affection. We call it love. We call it emotional reciprocity, whatever the fuck you want to call it. But can you see that? Can you measure it? That's the question. So because you can't measure it in a lab, does that mean it doesn't exist? That's my point, right? So I think that's what he's trying to say. If we limit reality to what's practical and what can be measured within that frame, that's fine. But what about beyond that?
Yeah, we're missing something.
We're missing something, right?
Yeah, we're missing a lot of information. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, let's keep it going.
I mean, it's a fair enough question, I suppose, because I think it might help bring out the contrast a little bit better. Can you give an example of something that you think we do have a description of what it is? Just so like we can bring out this contrast between what something is and what it does.
Damn, they're going crazy with the ads.
Unfortunately, this is where it seems to get a bit question beggy. But to clarify, as a
For
throwaway,
real.
the reason why I'm bringing this up is not to say there's some kind of gap with physics and let's plug it in with consciousness. It's rather for me to point out, like to make a sort of cumulative case, that it seems to me that if you actually want to know with certainty what a thing actually is, there might only actually be one such thing in the universe, which is phenomenology, which is experience, right? And to the extent, and it's kind of like this polarization is so interesting, because the stuff that you can mathematize, like mass and charge and all that kind of stuff, is the stuff that you sort of don't know what it is. But the stuff that you do know what it is the stuff that you can't like mathematize and scientifically describe. So famously, people have spent a long time trying to scientifically account for or describe phenomenological experience and failed. And yet, if I ask you what it like is to experience, you know what I'm talking about. You don't just know what your experience like sort of does. You don't just know that like when you see the color red, you associate it with stop. You don't just know that. You know what it's like to experience redness. You just know that directly, right? As direct experience. And so when you ask, is there something that we know for what it is? I think any kind of phenomenological experience, that is, you know, anything you hear, anything you see, anything you touch, anything you feel, any kind of emotional state that you can only best describe through analogy and poetry, that is you interacting with something as it is. And that's the very reason why we struggle so much to put it into descriptive words.
So now he's just arguing for non-dual idealism.
He's
Because
talking
he's
about
saying-
qualia.
Yeah, he's talking about quality, and he's saying what things are, what it really is experience. And that's,
Exactly, and that's the whole thing about being a mystic. And people give mystics a bad rap because they put us in the category of magical thinking and whatnot. And really, we're just talking about the experience of things. Because, like he said, you may see red and you think and associate it with a stop sign. I may see red and connect it with anger or love or rage.
Mhm.
Your inner experience that you're having when you see the color red may be completely different from the next person. So objectively, we know the color is red. There's no debate about that. That's what we named it. That's what we call it. And we all see it with our eyes and perceive it that way, right? Unless you're colorblind, which is a thing. But how you experience it, that's completely subjective.
Mm-hmm. But the one thing it all has in common is it's an experience, one way or the other. Whether there's no
Yep.
color, whether there is color, whether there's symbols to the color or no symbol to no color, it's all an experience. So
Yes,
that's
exactly.
the commonality right there that he's pointing out. So if we were to say what it is, the only thing we know about it is it's an experience.
How we experience it, that's all we can say.
Right. Right.
Because, you know, that's just when you experience something so directly, especially if that's kind of the only way it can be known, it's very difficult to communicate that to another person who doesn't already know what you're talking about. Like I can tell you that my jeans are blue, and you'll know what I'm talking about, but only because you've also had that private isness of the experience of blue. Trivially, if I tried to tell a blind person that my jeans were blue, they would say, okay, what does that mean? And if you ask blind people how they understand color, they're like, well, I kind of think I get it, because people talk about how like it's associated with sadness and how the ocean is blue and stuff like that, but they don't know what it is. And they kind of start to sound a little bit like a scientist. You know, they tell you the effect that blueness has in the world without being able to tell you what it is, because they're in the same position as the scientists, which is to say, you know, interacting in a world in which they are blind to the nature of the thing itself.
So is he saying scientists are blind?
I just want to ask, clarify something. When he's saying, but he don't know what it is, what I'm taking it to mean is that a blind person can't have the experience because they're never going to see the color, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they can only talk about it from, I guess, things that they've heard it be described as, right? So when
Right.
he's saying, but they don't know what it is, I think he's actually saying they don't know the experience. They haven't
Right.
had the experience. They can't experience it.
Right.
Right.
So the isness is the experience.
Right.
So yeah, that's idealism, to say that what is experience.
Right.
Okay.
And he said that's the only way you could know is through the experience, right?
Right. Because
Okay.
how would you? Yeah. Because what else you got? All you got is a
Yeah.
description that you've heard or read about or something. You know.
I think that's what
And
the
now what were
scientist
you
is doing.
saying?
Go ahead.
I was saying, what were you saying though? You started off by saying, so is he saying that scientists are blind?
Yeah. So it seems like, is he saying that science is kind of operating metaphysically blindly? Because all they're
Well, I
talking
think
about is descriptions. They're not talking
he's,
about
yeah, I
this.
think, sorry, yours lacking.
Yeah. So they're talking about what, a scientist, or the method of science is to explore how things behave or describe how things behave. But metaphysics is about what things are, like ontology, like what a thing is. And
Which deals
science,
with the experience though.
yeah. But the science
Which
doesn't want to say that it's not the experience, it's the thing that describes the experience. So they're saying
right.
what it really is the things where the description. So it's the map that's real. The experience, it's kind of like, it goes back to that debate we were having with those knuckleheads on Facebook. Like, oh, what's in the math is more real than the experience. The experience comes after that. But then that leads to the hard problem of consciousness, because how do you get an experience out of descriptions? Like, it seems like you have to be conscious to even do descriptions, but maybe I'm dumb. I don't know.
Yep, you're so dumb, Scott.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, man. How'd you come out so dumb?
I don't know, man. I missed it when God was handing out brains.
In describing the world with mathematics. Mathematics is an epistemology without eyes. It just can't see the world. I was talking to my friend about this the other day, and he said, I guess it just doesn't really add up. And I was like, no, it does add up. It just doesn't do anything else. That's the best way that I can characterize this. So the reason why I smirked when you asked that question is because from an outside perspective, it seems like I'm coming in saying, like, consciousness must be something not reducible to scientific explanation, because science can't explain what things are. And then it's like, but when does anything, when can you know what anything actually is? And I go, oh, well, consciousness. And it sounds sort of weirdly circular. But for me, it sort of went the other way around. I started with the recognition that science can't tell me what anything is. And then I'm like, but hold on, there is something I do know what it is. So if I can't describe that with scientific language, then what can I describe it with? And that's not to say that it's like that consciousness has to be some kind of mystical, spooky, supernatural thing. It's just to say that specifically the language of the scientific revolution, the language of mathematics and physics and chemistry and biology and stuff, isn't going to be able to capture it. Which similarly, you wouldn't be able to capture, I don't know, the rules of chess in the language of music theory. Right. And that's not a surprise, because they're doing different things, But if you decided that the entire world can be described in terms of music theory, and then you couldn't explain the rules of chess, here are your options. Either you say, well, I guess the rules of chess just can't exist. Or you say that somehow the rules of chess do exist, but they must be like reducible to music theory in some completely unimaginable and baffling manner. Or you just admit that you're wrong, that everything can be explained in terms of music theory, right? And I think that's the position we're in. People either have to say that consciousness, this doesn't exist, it's an illusion, which I think is just unthinking, literally. Or they say that consciousness is by some way reducible to physical stuff.
Yeah. Why can't people just say they don't know? Yeah, like, why can't they just say they're wrong?
Yeah, just say you're fucking wrong. Just stop with the cognitive dissonance. it's very annoying to
Yeah,
go so far as to say, oh, well, maybe there's a slight percent chance that you're not even conscious, that none of this is even happening. Well, at that point, why don't you just go annihilate yourself? Because what the fuck is everything else for then? So, I can't even entertain that type of stuff. I really can't. And he's really putting it nicely, but that
yeah,
is
yeah,
exactly the problem. That's the
yeah.
problem right there.
Yeah, it's very incoherent, and it's incoherent by the rules of the people who do that. Like by their own logic, it doesn't work. So
I guess anything to be right, anything to win a fight, that's complete ego shit right there. I can't stand it. I cannot stand it. Let me
yeah,
shut up though.
it's like one thing one guy said. It's like it creates a lot of anger because of the fact that it has such a low bar. It's such a low, dumb, like it. I don't want to call it dumb because
And
there's a lot of
it feels like gaslighting because
yes,
on one hand, you're telling this person to question their own reality, right? Um, but yet you're pushing your agenda about your science, right? And it's like, well, then how do you know that your process of science is fucking real? Like, why are you doing what you're doing then? Like it just doesn't, it's crazy, man. It feels like insanity. I don't like those kind of conversations because it's like the only way you don't get anywhere like that unless you completely just, like he said, deny consciousness, right? And when someone does that to you, it feels like you're being gaslit while
yeah,
they're upholding their viewpoint and pushing for it to be the truth. They're telling you that consciousness may not even exist, that your experience may not even be real, yet they're pushing their own agenda. And it's like, you know what I'm saying?
well, yeah, because remember on that interview I had, and the guy was saying, well, number one, I deny consciousness. I don't think consciousness is real at all. So how do you deal with that? And I was like, well, how do you know that if you're not conscious? And then he was like,
Right?
blah, 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 blah. Like it didn't make any sense.
It's just
Like
at that point,
some
just say you're
conversation.
wrong. Right.
Yeah.
Just say you're wrong at that point. Like show some humility and just say you're fucking wrong.
Yeah.
It's
Like it's
it's just
okay.
that easy. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's okay.
It's not that hard.
You're not gonna look dumb for having some humility, but you're really gonna look dumb trying to defend that.
Yeah. It's just ego.
Never say never or anything, but I just cannot see how that could be the case. Or you just admit that you're wrong, that everything can be reducible to scientific
Right.
explanation, and yet consciousness abounds.
And he said,
Yeah, his channel must be highly monetized.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So
Does that
you've
make
got
any
either
sense?
reductionism, illusionism, or a third way, which I suppose would either be dualism or some kind of panpsychism.
Yeah, I suppose so. Or like idealism,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. But is it, when you say idealism, are you talking about like a kind of transcendental idealism whereby, our experience is framed by categories in a kind of Kantian sense? Or do you mean like a kind of, because you talked about like analytic idealism before.
Mm-hmm.
I just,
Yeah, no,
can
I
you help
don't.
me
I
understand
think
that a little
like
bit?
Kant's distinction between the phenomena and the noumena is really useful and instructive here, but I don't think we land in the same place as him. But then I don't know very much.
yeah. So he's talking about the phenomena and the noumena too. I
Yeah, I
thought
just
they,
heard that. Like he said, he brought up Kant. See, I wasn't familiar with him at all, and that was
yeah,
just something that came up when I was looking up something. So as I was reading it, I didn't really know who Kant is.
yeah. He's a big proponent of idealism from the old days. So
Much about Kant, so I say that with great care. The term analytical idealism is one that I'm sort of, I want to say I borrowed from, but it is just the worldview of Bernardo Kastrup, who's an interesting guy. I mean, he's got a lot of I mean, a fascinating attack on materialism, and relatively controversial. Like when I did a show with him, half of the audience were like, "This is awesome. We love Bernardo. This is so interesting." And half of them were like, "Who is this guy?" It's like I had Deepak Chopra on or something, and it's really interesting to see. But I've got a lot of time for his views. Idealism, I guess, comes in many forms. Like idealism is broadly speaking the view that the universe is made out of mind. It's made out of like mental stuff. And there are a few ways you could cash that out, right? Like you could be some kind of solipsist who believes that the whole universe kind of exists inside of your head. Right? That's not a view that I agree with. Certainly not that it all exists inside of your head. There's also a kind of like, so like Berkeley's most associated with idealism historically, I suppose, in the early modern period, where he just sort of started to notice that you can't really separate out your idea of a thing from the thing itself. Like you can't sort of you can't like imagine a tree that nobody is imagining, you know, because as soon as you're imagining it, you're imagining it. He started to realize that, you know, you can't really see something without sort of having the experience of seeing it, and they're very connected in an important way. And basically he ends up concluding that, you know, like stuff really only exists in so long as it's being like perceived by a mind, which I think today sounds a little bit woo-woo, and I don't really like the way that is presented. But of course, there are some obvious objections to this view. Like, well, if the universe needs to be like perceived in order to exist, and some people have tried to, this is the Deepak Chopra thing, trying to resurrect it by saying, well, quantum mechanics tells us that if no one's observing the moon, then the moon is just this like sort of cloud of quantum mush. It's not really how it works, but that is kind of where the Copenhagen interpretation will lead people to think. That's what Schrodinger's cat's about, by the way.
Yeah, but Schrodinger's cat was making fun of that idea of the Copenhagen interpretation, which is to say, if something isn't observed, you have the observer problem, which is to say, if you don't observe something, it really is just a cloud of possibilities, like probabilities and stuff, until observed. And then once you observe it, it snaps into existence. But this guy Schrodinger made that analogy about, oh, so that's like saying if you put a cat in the box with poison leaking out, he's either dead or alive, but while he's in the box and no one can see him, he's both dead and alive. But once you open the box, he's either going to be alive or dead, because it collapses into one state or the other based on that observation. And so he was just using that to make fun of the idea of quantum mechanics. But the Copenhagen interpretation says, no, in reality, things are just in different positions at the same time, superposition. And I think that's a thing, and that is a thing though in quantum mechanics, right?
Yeah, and also, what is it called? Wave function collapse.
Yes,
I believe.
Yep.
So yeah, it's like tossing a coin, and the possibility exists, you know, whether it's heads or tails, and before it lands on something. Which would be what, the observer effect, right?
Yeah, the observer effect. And even till today, I mean, this interpretation of quantum mechanics is the most popular, but it's so funny how most people hate that idea. And they're always like, oh, that's just woo-woo. You're just misinterpreting quantum mechanics.
What are they not agreeing with? I'm just so confused about this stuff. What's the disagreement here, you know?
I think mainly they're going to talk about, well, what counts as an observer? So they'll say it isn't consciousness that's the observer. The observer is just the photons. It's just the interaction of photons or electrons in the field of possibility. And once that interaction happens, like say with the instrument, like when you observe these small things, you use these electron microscopes, right? Electron microscopes. that light that you shine on it is what creates an interference, which causes the collapse, not the consciousness. So I guess their rebuttal is what counts as the observation isn't necessarily the consciousness. It's the interaction of that light that's going on. And so that's where the whole thing, you know, because like Deepak Chopra, he'll say, no, it's the consciousness, because even if you're shining a light on it, there's other experiments like I think there's some other way, you know, there's different experiments. I can't think of it right offhand, but it basically says that information, once you learn about the information of the experiment, then it collapses into a position one way or the other. I'm not sure how to explain that. It's kind of complicated. It's like
it just hurts my brain. That it hurts my brain.
Yeah,
because
really,
like,
yeah.
okay, if the light shines on something, it's just the light, but then someone is shining that light on there. There's still intention to observe. So I don't get it. Like,
so they're saying like the moon exists whether any conscious being sees it or not, because the sun, the light from the sun, or the interaction of the universe around the moon caused the moon to collapse into its state as a moon. And, you know, it doesn't have to do with whether people are actually looking at it. It has to do with whether there's some sort of physical interaction going on in the universe. But yeah, that's where the whole argument, I think, where they come down on one way or the other.
I don't get it, but I mean, that's, you know, once you don't see it, you don't see it, and it can still be there. I get it. You individually.
Yeah.
But why does that even matter? Who cares? Like, you're no longer there to observe it. It may be there for other people to observe, but there are still observers. But once you remove the observer entirely, we don't know whether it still exists or not. I mean, how could we possibly know that?
Yeah, like if you took a real skeptical position, yeah, you could say, how do you really know if you're not there to experience it? You don't know. I mean,
exactly.
You only know
So
as long as you're there observing it, you know. But if you're not there, how do you know? Like, that's the real skeptical position.
Right. And I think that would be the most honest, honestly, because we only know that the tree is still there because there are other observers left after you don't see it. But what if all the observers are removed? We don't know that. So.
Right. And that goes into this whole consciousness thing, because it's like the only thing you know is what you experience in your head, so to speak. But you're never outside of your mind to observe this reality, the noumena as it actually is. You only know the phenomena, the way that the reality appears in your consciousness. So to say that, oh, it's the reality is this or that outside of my conscious experience is kind of the same thing. You could apply that same skepticism and say, well, you don't know that. All you know is what's in your experience.
Exactly. You wouldn't know that at all.
Right. Maybe that's the point he's getting at. So let me see.
Like, one of my favorite misconceptions in the history of science is that Schrodinger's cat is both dead and alive. Schrodinger came up with this example in order to show how ridiculous the Copenhagen interpretation
That's what I was
of quantum
saying.
mechanics is. Like, Schrodinger sort of comes along, sees this idea that, like, oh, well, it's all sort of probabilistically true at once. So until I observe it, I build the system, and until I open the box, the cat is both dead and alive. Really, that's what you think. And it's just sort of embedded into pop culture as like, that's what Schrodinger really thought. It was a reductio ad absurdum. Anyway, that's a footnote.
What?
I can't remember why I brought it up either. I can't remember what I was talking about.
You're talking about.
Go ahead.
What was that word? He said it was a reductio ad what?
Yeah, reductio absurdum means, in other words, the absurdity to the contrary. Like, in other words,
okay,
if you believe that, then basically what you're saying is this crazy, absurd idea. So,
Right. He's saying that he
in other
basically
words,
was making fun
we
of it,
prove
right?
it's false. Yeah, it's proven false because to believe it is just absurd. It's kind of like
Right.
saying, you know, there is no consciousness, and I know that for a fact. It's like that's the reductio absurdum. You know, it's like that's absurd because how do you know anything if you're not conscious? You know, it's like that's what proves it. It's got to be false. You know,
Right.
so that's that
Just
kind of
never
thing.
heard that phrase before. That just
Yeah,
blew my
yeah.
mind. Them British people, they got some damn vocabulary on them.
Yeah, this is like a philosophical term. Yeah.
Something about idealism. So
Yes.
so Berkeley is like, okay, so things need to be observed in order to exist. And one famous sort of counterexample to this is the melting candle, right? If I put a candle in a room and I light it on fire and I leave, when I come back in an hour's time, it will have melted. And so it seems like it must have existed even though no one was in the room to observe it. And Berkeley's response to this is that well, it was being observed by God. And that, so he sort of has, I guess your minor premise or your first premise would be like, you know, things can only exist in so long as they're being observed. Your second premise might be something like some things exist without being observed by any earthly creatures. Therefore, there must be some non-earthly perceiver of all things, and that's
this game. You're not ready for it.
These ads are killing us.
God. So there's also this view of idealism that the universe exists sort of in the mind of God. So you've got an idealism where the universe is inside of your head. There's like an idealism where the universe is kind of inside the mind of God and we're kind of in there somewhere. Bernardo Kastrup's analytic idealism is kind of neither of these. He just thinks that the stuff the universe is made out of is mentality, is like mental states.
Okay.
Not the mental states of anybody, but just that the kind of things they are, or the kind of stuff that it is just mental. And it's a little bit difficult to even explain what that means. And I'm not sure I fully understand it. But I guess the mistake that might be made is I think Kastrup would say that there doesn't need to be somebody having an experience for there to be an experience. Right? So in the same way that, I don't know, if there was just like a t-shirt on the floor and I was like, I think that thing is a t-shirt. And you said, oh, well, whose t-shirt is it? And I say, no, I don't think it's anybody's t-shirt. I think it's just there. And you were just like, I don't understand. How can you, like, if you have a t-shirt, it has to be somebody's t-shirt, right? Like it has to belong to somebody. Whereas like, no, it just doesn't. Like most t-shirts we encounter belong to somebody, but they don't have to, right? And so Kastrup is like, yeah, like people have experiences all the time, but there doesn't need to be a person having an experience for the experience to exist. So he thinks that the world is kind of made up of whatever the sort of the substance of mind is that you have in your own mind, whatever that substance is, he just thinks the whole universe is made out of that. That's not to say you exist in someone else's mind. It's just to say that it's made out of the same kind of stuff. Now, I think this is really interesting, but when I present these ideas, like, I don't know, Joe, you have a very serious and philosophically rigorous channel, and there will be people thinking, you know, what on earth is this guy banging on about? Like, I'm not an analytical idealist, right? I think it could be true, who knows? But I think it's interesting, and I'm not representing it very well here probably, but I think that these kinds of ideas about mentality being foundational rather than the physical being foundational are really sort of growing in popularity at the moment. Anybody who's paying attention, I think, in the philosophy of mind and in the sort of colloquial space, they talk about the quiet revival of Christianity at the moment. I think there's like a very quiet revival of idealism happening. If you pay,
yeah, there's a lot of idealists popping up all over the place, and
I agree.
Yeah, it's gaining a lot of popularity.
Modern science is going in that direction. It seems to be a paradigm shift.
Yeah, exactly. If everything is conscious, as in panpsychism, then everything is perceiving, which allows you to retain to be is to be perceived, without saying the world disappears when not being perceived. Yeah, I get that. I get that idea. But a lot of physicalists would disagree, because their whole premise is that experience either doesn't exist, like it's an illusion, like there's really no experience, you're just having an illusion, or
Still take consciousness for that, though.
yeah, you have to have
You can't be delusional unless you have a mind.
you have to be experiencing an illusion to know you're having an illusion.
Jesus, man.
I mean, I would think. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just confused.
Attention to what's going on. And so I guess I'm trying to give these views like a fair hearing. And I've got to say that there's a lot in there that I find plausible. The sort of inability for physicalists to even define what physicalism is in like a coherent manner. The inability of science to explain conscious states, and the irreducibility of consciousness to like physical stuff. Those are views that I think I do agree with. So your question was, what have I changed my mind about? And I think when we first met, I don't remember where I was at, but I remember for a long time saying, I don't like calling myself a materialist because I'm so freaked out by consciousness. That's not to say I'm not a materialist, but just to say there's something weird going on there that I don't fully understand. And since I've met you, I think that has shifted from there to a sort of like, I don't think materialism is true, depending on what you mean by materialism.
It's really interesting, actually, because I think that in some ways a similar kind of thought has led us to quite different conclusions here, because I was an argument that's been very influential on me. It's an argument that sort of bears a passing resemblance to Berkeley's, and it comes from Nietzsche, and it's his idea of kind of broadly speaking, the inconceivability of the thing in itself, the thing separate from any kind of perception or perspective on that thing. And I think it's very important to note that this in itself, like people interpret Nietzsche in different ways, this in itself doesn't, much like Kastrup actually, because I don't think this is an implication of Kastrup's view either, these do not in themselves give rise to what we might call subjective idealism. So subjective idealism, to come up with a definition on the fly that I've seen used somewhere but might be like not the standard one, would be the idea that reality is up to every individual person. I think that a very interesting distinction that can sometimes bring these debates into focus a little, and also make views like analytical idealism a little bit less on their face insane seeming, is to suggest that just because something is mind framed or made of mental stuff, because that's going beyond mind framed. Mind framed would be something like saying that, an argument that I've made in the past, which is that in favor of like some loose form of pragmatism, funnily enough, which is that all of the incoming stuff is in some sense shaped by both our perceptual apparatus in a kind of human-wide sense, in a kind of naturalized Kant sense, but also shaped by our own conceptual scheme. Like, as in, it's only a good example of this. Like, if you see a shape off in the distance that is, in fact, a tree, but looks a bit like a man, your brain will sometimes complete that, and you will just perceive it as a man. Like, it's not that there's sense data coming in, and then the interpretation is, like, laid on top of that. There's a certain type of interpretation baked into every experience.
So this is why I don't, also like you, I don't like the term the mind in that way, because I see the mind as something the brain does, and so the mind is limited, and it's going to fall for illusions and delusions, and parlor tricks, magic tricks, stuff like real easy, because the mind is like that.
I see mind as a fractal of consciousness integrated into the interface that we call physicality. And so when it comes to the human mind in the human body, we use our eyes to perceive, but even with our eyes, we don't actually see reality for what it is. The brain interprets reality. You know what I'm saying? So that's why, like he said, you could still have a completely different perspective on something that's so-called objectively true, depending on how your brain interprets it and how your eyes see it, right?
Yeah, I kind of lean towards like there has to be some bridge between what the brain is doing, like the mentality, the mind stuff, has got to be of the same sort of category as whatever it is that's appearing to it. So we may not know fully what it is through the brain, but it is something related to like a mentality or a consciousness, something like that. So it's got to be some sort of mentality, cognition, whatever you want to call it, that's able to modulate, demodulate, because that's
Right.
how we know. That's exactly how we know anything about reality at all, is through consciousness. So there has to be, so that interface has to work with the universe, you know? And so there's got to be something about the universe that creates this bridge, like like, you know, like with emergent properties, for example, like the fire triangle, you know, combustion, heat, you know, all of these things lead to other physical emergent properties like fire. But that's fine because they're all linked together in the physical. But when you're talking about consciousness, that's a whole other category. That's an experience. First person subjective experience is of a different nature than the thing we're observing as objects in physical reality. And so
Right.
I can see consciousness emerging out of different kinds of consciousness, kind of like what Dave said here, that why can't there be consciousness that we don't understand? Right, exactly. Like there has to be some bridge between our mind and the universe that makes that bridge happen. Just like the bridge happens between water and H2O. You know, it's like physical things beget physical things, and it evolves and changes and creates emergent properties. So consciousness, our human minds, you know, different conscious things like animals, plants, whatever, it's all on a spectrum, right? And the way that consciousness is interacting with the universe is because of that consciousness bridge, you might say. That's my thought. What do you think?
I have no idea. I'm confused by that. I'm not exactly sure what you're saying, to be very
Like-
honest.
Like say, I can only say it with an analogy. Like say, if you want, you know, some liquid, you have to like say you want to make Kool-Aid. You know, you have to put together water, and you have to put together the sugar and the coloring and all that kind of stuff to make the Kool-Aid, right? All of those things create liquid, though. Like it's all in the liquid family, kind of like ice and water and steam. It's all related. So it's no big deal that ice can emerge into steam.
But it's
right?
already liquid. You're just changing.
It's already right. It's
flavor and the
already
color
the
of it.
same. Right. It's already the same property. It's just in a different form. Right.
Okay.
So say human mind is a consciousness. We have human consciousness. So it's an emergent property, but it's got to be emergent property from something like itself. It has to be of itself, just like steam has to be related to ice. You know, there has to be that common, you know, substance, right? So
Okay, so what are you saying, that the human mind has to be a fractal or something
Yes.
that comes from mind?
Yes, that's right. Exactly. It has to fractal off from something greater, like something of the same sort of substance, in fact.
Right. I agree with that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And this is where the hard problem comes in, because there's a real hard there's a hard problem in trying to link physical stuff to mental stuff. They're two different categories altogether.
I
So it's
mean, you
hard to
could say that, but I don't believe that because in my LFM model, the way I look at it is that consciousness within itself possesses the quality of consciousness and physicality. It's just a
right.
constant, it's a transformation through, it's an expression of consciousness. What you're saying is if you got water and you turning it into Kool-Aid, then Kool-Aid is a different expression of the same liquid, right?
Right.
So that's kind of how I see consciousness and physicality. Physicality is a different expression of consciousness, or just another
Yeah.
expression of consciousness. There is no true separation. It exists simultaneously. It already has the qualities of physicality. It's like consciousness cannot be anything other than what it expresses itself as, and reality can only be what reality is. So obviously, I'm just thinking logically, consciousness is both mental and physical.
Okay. So that's really simple. That's kind of like panpsychism in a way. So that's very similar. Yeah, very similar at least. Yeah. So, and I think Alex is a panpsychist as he describes here. So I'll keep on going.
And yeah, I've used that in various different ways in the past, but
More ads.
one way that you might take this thought experiment is to say that, look, just because I can see this guy as a tree or a man, or I can see this tree as a tree or a man, doesn't mean that I can see him as an elephant. Like, just because we're admitting that there might be some kind of mental interference in perceptions, that doesn't in any way apply a kind of subjectivism about truth, or like an extreme subjectivism about truth. I suppose to a certain extent it implies that our definitions of truth must be what's called cognitive interest relevant. Cognitive interest relative, which just means that they're the kind of things that are shaped by us being humans, which I don't think is nearly as controversial. And this distinction is from Hasok Chang. And you contrast this with mind controlled, which is when you actually do control things. So, like, you might think that if I imagine a really embarrassing memory from my past, I can make myself feel embarrassed. I might even be able to make myself blush. That's a mind-controlled state. It's also a mind-frame state, but it's a mind-controlled state. And just because something is mind-framed doesn't mean that it's mind-controlled. And I suppose in theory, just because something's mind-controlled doesn't mean it's mind-framed, but I just can't think of a good example of the other way. But I think that, like, the blurry shape off in the distance that could materialize in a whole bunch of different ways, but clearly can't materialize in every way or any way, I think is a good example of how, just because somebody says something like the world might be made up of ideas, or you can't have access to the thing in itself, you can have access to different perspectives, and those perspectives might diverge, doesn't mean that the divergence is like infinite or unbounded. You can have very definite limits on what it's possible to perceive.
So this kind of like reminds me somehow of the interface theory of consciousness, like how our interface is really shaping what it is that we're calling reality, in a way.
Yeah, for sure. Because if you compare like an interface to, let's say, a vehicle, you're going to have a different experience in a Maserati as opposed to a fucking, I don't know, Ford Explorer. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, the interface does somewhat, dictate the experience.
Yeah.
And I think that ties directly into evolution, but that's whole nother topic.
Well, I just want to say I appreciate the way these young guys are talking about these concepts, because a lot of this stuff is for really mature people, like a lot of these things, even I can have a hard time following a lot, and most people seem like they do, and so it's really
they give it some real thought for sure.
Yeah, they're really grabbing onto it, and this stuff is not easy.
That's nice to see.
Yeah, it really isn't, man.
Sorry, I think there's a lag.
Yeah, I'll keep on going.
while still incorporating a human element into perception. So it seems like we basically want to balance two things. We want to have the external world as like stable enough to do all of the things that we can clear, or to account for all the things that we clearly do with the world. Like if you and I go to the same room and look at the same thing, we're going to have a similar enough experience that we can then communicate information between us about it and build entire models of reality that we seem to be able to use to interfere with reality in pretty incredible ways. At the same time, we want to recognize that we're not like spiritually totally distinct from the world, unless you're like a dualist, right? I think that, for all his reputation as a skeptic, one of the lovely things of Descartes' philosophy is it sort of allows you to have like pretty direct knowledge of the world, not in a direct realist sense, but like pretty uninterfered with knowledge of the world. If we're part of the world, we just don't have that. We have to account for the fact that all of our perceptions and judgments are human perceptions and judgments. I think that, if you're going to be a consistent naturalist, that needs to be something that you take into account. That actually, there are certain things, there's a certain kind of doublespeak we sometimes do, I think, in philosophy, where we accept that we're part of the natural world without fully treating ourselves as part of the natural world. And I think that is, that's a tension that I think, well, hopefully the next 50 years of philosophy, I think is very well placed to dig into. But sorry.
Yeah.
So I wanted to say, I agree with this guy in the comments. Reality will appear completely different to a moth than it does to us. And I agree, because I think the only reason we have such a thing as objective reality is because we're all humans are generally similar, right? We have a generally similar interface. We all have a brain, blah, 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 right? So it's not quite naturally, we're all going to perceive things similarly, right? But I wanted to ask a question, and I just wanted to hear you guys' thoughts on that. What do you think, is going on here? Because if you look at society nowadays, there can be like an event that happened. Let's take, for example, what happened in Minneapolis with that lady who was shot, right? And you can see this split happening in society where it seems like one half of people see the same thing and have an entirely different viewpoint than the other half. And it's like, what the fuck is going on? How are we all looking at the same thing, but have complete opposite views on that? And it just kind of puzzles me, it seems there's a split happening on how objective reality is being perceived lately, and I'm just wondering what's up with that. I don't know. Is that still on topic? Can I ask that?
Yeah. And put your answers in the comment section, guys. I'd be interested. Because for me, I just think it's like bias, that we grow up with, like, depending on, it's kind of like if you grow up in a church, a very evangelical, fundamentalist, conservative church with a conservative family, then you're going to see it totally different than someone raised in a different bias. That's probably part of it.
Right, but then that just goes to show that we really don't see things for what they are, right? That the way we see things is heavily influenced by, like you said, bias, the way that you were raised, or conditioning, or whatever, because it's really, this is why I don't really like to get into these things anymore, because it seems like that's all we're seeing now, that people aren't really looking at shit. I guess, what's the word?
Yeah, you want to say objectively, but we can all see the same objective facts, but we just interpret the facts, the same objective facts, in our own subjective, irrational way. It has nothing to do with reason or rationality. It has everything to do with our bias and, looking for things that'll support your, moral crusade that you may have, or, political ideologies and stuff, like, or religious, whatever. It's like, it's all tainted. It's like everybody's looking at the same objective reality through, filtered glasses.
Different lenses.
You wonder, why is everything blue? It's because you've got blue lenses on your glasses.
Right. Yeah.
Take the motherfuckers off, and maybe you'll see things for how they really are. But see, that's the problem. Everybody thinks they have. It's you're the
Yeah.
one that
People
has
used to
the
tell me
lens on.
that.
Yeah, it's like
People used
you're
to
the
tell
one.
me that. Take those rose-colored glasses off, biatch.
Yeah, exactly. They'll all say the same thing.
That was a bit of a standard rant.
One
So,
hopes.
just to bring this.
Hello.
Do you want to play with me?
Sure. You want me to help you with your groceries?
Sorry, you were going to say something.
No, it's good. It's your show. I've been speaking way too much, but it's nice to be under the assumption when you're the one being interviewed. It's nice to feel the freedom to keep talking, because I like to do that on my own show a lot of the time, but then I feel bad for the guest that's got on the train and come down. But what you say about us, sort of in some way constructing the world, in that like the thing that you see is going to be dependent on what your brain is doing to interpret the data that's coming in. That's not to say that it can do anything. I think is totally right. So like, to say that the world is made out of mental states or something, or that panpsychism is true, that consciousness is foundational, is not to say that your sort of interior mental world is completely like disconnected from the real world outside. It's just to say that the real world outside is of a different kind of thing to the way that you are like interpreting it as physical matter. So our brains are interpreting the world around us as physical. We see extension, we see weight, we see color, and we see all that kind of stuff. But like, actually, I mean, Kastrup helpfully compares us to like to airplanes. Most people know, even when I say this in other contexts where it doesn't feel like I'm about to pull the wool over people's eyes, I'm just like, you understand that like you don't have direct access to the world. Like, we like to think that we're just sort of sat inside of our heads, and then we've got these great big windows that we're sort of looking at the world through. But it's quite clear that what's really happening is the world as it is this sort of jumbled mess of like waves and particles and energy and all kinds of stuff that's like photons are being fired at these receptors. And people always talk about how like, well, then, our brains sort of translate that information into the experience of sight. And everybody knows that this is what's going on. Again, this is the noumena versus the phenomena. Kant was right in saying that we will never know the thing in itself. We will only know it as we perceive it. So then the question is, do we think there's any good reason that our evolutionary heritage would have for giving us essentially an inaccurate picture of the world? Well, yes, like loads of reasons to suggest that. Like if you just experienced the world directly as it is, it would just be this like overload of information, and you wouldn't know what to do with any of it. You need to sort of categorize it. You need to categorize it into useful things. I think the reason that
So that goes into what you were saying on your video again about, evolving to survive, not necessarily knowing access to the truth. And that you had mentioned that actually a lot of species dies out if they know more of the truth about the world, capital T truth. So it's kind of like,
yeah, not necessarily if they know more. What I was really talking about is that, we all kind of work with unseen things all the time, and it's kind of inevitable, and it's part of how we survive, because we all have to sometimes anticipate things, right, before we have all the facts on a situation. So I was really talking about like intuitive hits or intuition, and that we all kind of use that, even though, materialists want to say it's all about what you can see with the eyes. But I do agree with him on as far as if we were to, I don't think that we would be able to handle that much information if we were to see everything, in its entirety. It has to kind of be organized. Like, imagine a file room. One of my first jobs was working in a file room, and imagine books just being everywhere and piled up. Like, how long would it take you to find something? You'd have to dig through the whole fucking pile of books. So what we do is we compartmentalize, we organize, you know what I'm saying? That's part of how we.
That's a great analogy. Yeah, that's a really great, and I'll use that. That's awesome. That's right.
And I think
Because
that's what he's saying, you know?
yeah, absolutely.
There's so much to it that it has to be separated, right?
Yeah, and organized in a coherent way.
Yeah.
Perceive objects is because they're functional. You know, I'm a mereological nihilist. I don't believe in a distinction between material objects, but I think we perceive these distinctions because, you know, you want a cup so you can grab it and drink out of. You want a tool so you can use it to do stuff. But also, like, everybody knows that evolution selects for survivability rather than truth. So the way that our faculties have evolved to interpret the world is based on what's most useful to us, rather than like trying to be sensitive to the true nature of the world. So our brains produce this sort of dashboard of sensory data that we, wherever we are, you know, inside of our skulls, are sort of sat. It's like that film. I didn't see it, but the it's called like Inside Out or something, where there's all the little creatures inside of the brain.
Yeah, the little homunculi.
And they're all sort of controlled. So something a bit like that. That's kind of how we like to pick.
Why choose Sleep Number? You'll sleep so comfortably. You can
picture ourselves, but you can compare that to us being like inside of the cockpit of an airplane, and an airplane is traveling through the sky, and there's like a real world out there, right? But you're a pilot, and suppose the windows are closed or it's too dark to see. You're flying at night, whatever. And so what you have is this dashboard of information in front of you that tells you about your velocity, the air pressure outside. It tells you your altitude. It tells you all kinds of stuff, right? It even tells you, like, you know, is someone using the toilet or whatever. Now, like, we understand that when somebody manufactured this cockpit, they realized that there's this real world out there which we want to sort of, and there are sensors on the outside of the airplane which then translate that data into a way that makes sense for us to use. So we've got a bunch of numbers on a screen, right? We've got, you know, a graph that tells us where we are in the sky and stuff. It would be a massive mistake to say, sat inside of that cockpit, you know, I think that outside of this airplane, what is actually outside of this airplane right now is like a graph or is, you know, a series of numbers. I think that is like what is outside of the plane. You'd sound like you'd completely lost your mind because, yeah, I understand that is what you are observing on this dashboard, which is representing the data that's hitting the sensors outside on the airplane, but it's not presenting it to you as it really is. It's presenting it to you in a way that you'll be able to interpret and understand it. But our sensors, our sensory data is doing the same kind of thing. It's taking the world as it is, and it's translating it into a way that we can sort of functionally understand. And so we have to realize that the very way that we are perceiving the world is very, like, I'm not saying that this proves this is the case, but there's a sort of very strong likelihood, I would say, that we're not experiencing the world as the world actually is, in the same way that the dashboard of our perception is not accurately representing the world, in the way that the dashboard of the airplane is not accurately representing the clouds outside. But that's not to say that the dashboard on the airplane can just say whatever it likes. It is still sensitive and exactly correlated to a real world out there. You know, it can't suddenly tell you that you're on the ground when you're actually, you know, 5,000 feet in the air.
Yes.
And yet it's not giving you a true representation of the world out there. So similarly, you might not be getting a real representation of what the world is actually like, but it is going to be like dependent on the real world. It's going to be causally connected to the outside world. It's going.
Well, we can solve that problem.
That's the map and territory
the
thing,
dashboard
you know?
just doesn't exist. Yeah.
Well, good luck flying that fucking
the dashboard doesn't exist.
Good luck flying that fucking plane without it. That's all I got to say. Good luck.
Yeah. Because if it doesn't map on the reality, we can't measure then it must not exist. So
yep. Let's just go with that. Good luck.
Yeah.
We'll see how that works out.
Exactly. Man. All right. That's funny. These guys are good though.
Correlate exactly with the outside world. So there's accuracy in that sense. But the mistake that we're making is like a metaphysical one. Like, because I experience a world of objects and physicality and kilograms and centimeters, that must be what the world is really made of. That's the mistake that someone like Kastrup thinks that people are making. And again, I want to issue another throat clearing that these are just views that I think are interested and am excited by. I have no idea whether it's true, but I think that they are entering the discussion in a big way. And I think if you are sat there thinking this is all nonsense and it sounds kind of insane, then fair enough. But then we need a few more people telling us why that's the case.
Yeah,
He's saying that for now.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything crazy about it.
No, he's being responsible, but he's not. Basically, he's gonna get there. Just give him a few more years.
Yeah, he'll get there. Because I mean, that's the reason he has to say that is because you well know how people think that shit is so crazy, but it's so obvious. It's like they won't deny the reasons you got there. They'll just deny your conclusion because it doesn't fit with the belief.
Their worldview.
Yeah, the worldview doesn't support that. So there's got to be another solution. There's just got to be another. Just they'll give you the science will come to a conclusion one day. So let's just hold on. Let's just wait for the science to come in. For now, don't trust yourself on this. For right now, let's just wait on the science.
Yeah.
You'll be waiting forever.
We've been waiting for billions of years.
Which brings me to the next video where Sadhguru talks about this very thing. And so I'll start playing a little bit of this too. It kind of picks up on that, actually.
But how do you measure the footprint of that one which has no physical form? You're trying to get the footprint of consciousness. How do you get that? You will never get that. Consciousness, if it is you're talking about as an ultimate possibility, then you cannot measure that.
And y'all go to the video. It's Consciousness and the Nature of Reality, Oxford University Cosmologist Dr. Jude is talking to Sadhguru, and she was really trying to just bridge the gap for him, but he started going in so hard on her. She's like looking like, what the hell? This shit got derailed or something. But he's making a point though. Yeah, she's like, what?
You can only experience it, the dance of life. Even if somebody is dancing, you cannot understand the dance. You can either dance or become the dance. If you dance, you will have fun. If you become the dance, you will be realized. So right now, this is all this is. If you're conducting your life well, you have some pleasure of life, but you have concerns of life also along with that. It never comes free, yes or no? But if you become life, well, am I not life? No. You're a bundle of thoughts, emotions, ideas, opinions, and scientific knowledge maybe, which is also your thought process. Because if I remove your memory, you don't just forget your neighbors, even your science you'll forget, isn't it?
So he's making the point, don't make this shit too complicated. Like, enjoy the dance of life. Just take it for what it is.
Just be the dance. Go through the experience.
Yeah, stop trying to dissect everything, because it's never going to give you…
You'll never do it. You'll never quantify consciousness. You just look like a damn fool.
Yeah, you'll never get to the thing that you're trying to get at, because it's not something you discover that way. It's an internal, subjective, first person sort of thing, and it's great. He did mention that it's great that science and philosophy really does acknowledge some of the problems of description versus isness, but that's not where the magic is.
Because this is all in our head. But beyond this, there is something else out of which we come and fall back in so many ways. In everywhere, if you observe life without objectivity, it's a dangerous terrain I'm entering. When you say objective, it is good for observing objects. Something that cannot be defined, which doesn't have a definition of shape, form or boundary, how do you look at it objectively? That is, you're trying to make a limitless possibility into an object. You will never succeed. You never will succeed. So I'm saying this convergence is fine, they're making peace with each other. They're not chasing a yogi out of the university anymore. Okay, that is convergence. This is a social phenomenon, I'm fine with it. But this is not really getting together, because if this has to become one, you have to enhance your instrument. You should not look at things from… for solving problems of medicine, this, that, you can look at a microscope. But you must turn inward. Turning inward, what do you turn inward? Do you roll your eyeballs inward? You can't do it. Turning inward is a different phenomenon. It's not objective in nature at all. If you approach it objectively, you'll spend a lifetime doing useless things.
Sadhguru, just to complete…
I think they'll send me out of the university.
They're gonna throw me out of this university.
Or you can just say, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, this doesn't exist.
And then what?
True. True. But you're not embracing what you are when you deny yourself, because you are that experience,
Yeah.
No, they won't. I still come back to the both and. I know that from what Bala's shared, that his experience has empowered his work. And I don't know how many people here feel this, but my own life journey on that perspective, looking inwards and looking inwards and looking inwards, doesn't mean that I'm not curious about how that looking inwards then appears in the world. And so for me, the convergence of science and spirituality is a joyous thing where I have…
It's a fantastic thing, but it's a social thing, that's all I'm saying.
For me, it's a personal thing. For me, it's not a social thing, it's a personal thing. Yet, having said it's a personal thing for me, it's also how I think, I feel, I see a lot of people involved in this work or in this realization or in this service see that it has the opportunity to empower transformational change in the world, because the old way of looking at the world, the old worldview we've had since the mid-19th century has been one of separation and objects and consciousness pushed out the door and existential awareness pushed out the door. This convergence, it seems to me, at a time when we don't have probably much time, if we're going to undertake some…
No, what I'm trying to separate
is really important, not just as a scientific revolution, but as a potential revolution to support human conscious evolution.
No.
That's what I'm trying to…
There are two aspects in this, Jude. I'm not trying to say something different. What I'm saying is, when you say it's personal, person is the basic unit of a society. So I'm saying what I like, what I think, what I appreciate is a social process.
I see, yeah,
If
take your point.
all these people do the same thing, then we are a society. If they don't agree with me, we are a different society, all right? So that is fine with me, that convergence is happening. As I said earlier, a yogi wouldn't be allowed into your university, but they're allowing me to come here and speak now. So which is a good beginning, but I'm saying this will bring a social change. You're talking about changing the world, you're essentially talking about the human society, right? Changing human society is a sociological process. I'm saying existentially, if you want to transcend your individual nature and know what you're referring to as consciousness, in that direction, nothing much is happening in any given university, because they're all busy They have done this with me also, many years ago, now I don't do that anymore. They want to measure what is your alpha in the head, what is your beta in the head, because it's all about how is it useful. Life is not useful. Life is just fantastic. Either you live it or you die. If you die also, it is not useful. If you live also, it's not useful. This is a simple thing human beings create. Oh, I am useful to you, you're useful to me. Life is not about use, it's a tremendous phenomena. How profoundly will you experience it? That's all there is. For profoundness of experience, you need to go beyond the limitations of your memory walls, which is your persona, which is your society, which is your religion, which is your, unfortunately, science today, which it should not be. Science should not be in that realm. But unfortunately, science is also coming from a limited amount of memory and push the boundary, push the boundary, push the boundary. Why don't you break the boundary, I'm asking?
So he's saying that science really isn't doing
Little
the trick.
brother catching
Why
up
isn't
with
even…
big brother.
Yeah.
Because that's all he's saying. He's saying you're just catching up with us. Like, you're like not telling me nothing new. You're still limited.
Yeah. And you're still trying to play that game of being, finding mechanism and usefulness and prediction and, the scientific method onto something that it should have nothing to do with, is what he's saying.
And he's saying you're trying to quantify consciousness and you'll never do it. So why don't you just focus on living?
Right. Just focus on it, doing the dance.
Yeah.
Instead of dissecting the dance.
There's this saying I've seen go around, and I think it's nice. It says, the tragedy is not dying. The tragedy is not living while you're alive. Like, you're conscious and you're spending your life trying to prove consciousness. Like, make it make sense.
Right. Like, enjoy your consciousness.
At the end of the day, it's about how profoundly you can experience this, right?
Right. That's right. That's exactly right. That's really deep, though, if you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, or not. Because how deep
personally, I'd rather heal the boundary than break it. Personally, I'd rather heal the boundary than break it.
You're being diplomatic. We have done this to the whole planet. Today we have some 194 nations. What is it? It's like we cut the planet like a birthday cake. 195 guests we had, we cut it into that. But I want a piece of your cake. Hello. Your piece of cake, I want a little bite out of that. That's the problem.
Yeah.
All right? But why have we first of all cut it and then trying to fix it? So this is because we are operating with one dimension of intelligence that we call as intellect, which is sharper the better. If you have a sharp instrument and you do everything with that, only thing you can do is cut it into more pieces, with best intentions maybe. With best intentions, I try to feed the cake to you with a sharp knife. Most probably I'll slit your tongue, isn't it? Good intentions only I have, but I'm stupid enough to use a sharp knife. Right now, that's all that's happening with humanity. They don't lack intention. They have intention, but they don't have means of execution. So I'm saying if you want a means of execution, turning inward is not about contemplation. What is there to contemplate? Same goddamn thoughts, how many times will you contemplate? Can you produce a thought for which you have no data? No. Let this… I'm very glad these AI machines are coming, I hope they come quickly, so that all of you feel redundant and no use. Because a machine is useful. A human being is not about use. It's not about how to use them. It's not about that. It's about how wonderfully this life can blossom, because when everything that you can do physically can be done by a machine, everything that you can do intellectually can be done by a machine, you will feel like a dud for some time, but then you will recover, and I believe you will become conscious. That's what I'm working for and waiting for.
I wish us all well with that one.
She's waiting for you to fall in love with everything. Please do it, okay?
Thank you, Sadhguru and Jude. We want to take some Q&As.
So, yeah, I wanted to share that. That's another perspective on the whole consciousness conversation, that it's not about dissecting it and trying to explain it and all of that stuff. It's just about living it out.
It's just about living. Yep.
Pointing to the,
It really is.
going inside rather than outside. That's a good balance. Because it is fun. I'm not going to lie. It is fun talking about the different models of consciousness and mind and reality. But at the end of the day, you can't spend your whole life consumed with that argument. You have to, at some point, once you understand your conscious, embrace it and live it and become that, become part of that. And that's where my non-dualism seems to I find the value really in that part, because that's mainly about how I express, that inner knowing towards the world and towards myself and stuff like that, the best I can. I'm not perfect.
I think that part of what he's also trying to say is that you're looking for external validation that you exist, instead of looking within your own experience, within yourself. And I think that is the result of this narcissistic kind of problem that we have. It's like an epidemic of systemic narcissism in a way, because we're so obsessed with the appearance that we forget who the fuck we are, and so we live for all this external validation to even know that we exist or that we're alive. And he's saying basically, look within, know yourself, and then embrace that and live it, because if you spend your life trying to quantify consciousness, that's like saying you don't really believe that you exist. That's how I see it. And how are you going to live fully? How are you going to live fully that way?
Because you're not even convinced yourself of who you really are, and it's good to know who you are. And, the more that I live and the more that I, interact with the world around me, the more I see that, I'm part of this natural world, and that I'm just part of the balance of the world. Not necessarily that everything's about me. It's mainly about the greater good, the greater nature. Nature, as Dave put it, is the datum of truth. Nature is the datum of truth. And we are part of nature. We're interacting within it, in the system. We're not outside of it to control it and to dissect it and try to figure it out and use it and exploit it. Basically, when we try to do that, it's almost like we're cutting ourselves, we're hurting ourselves in the process.
Yes.
In so many different ways. Yeah, animals don't have these problems. They don't know how lucky they are. I know they just live for the moment. They're in the present moment.
Hold up, I gotta say something about this comment.
Which one? Go ahead.
So, Iman Padama, am I saying this right? I'm sorry if I butchered it.
Padama.
He says,
okay.
men seem more interested in metaphysics in general, but there are always exceptions. I would disagree with that. I would say that women are what we would say more spiritual than men, intuitively so, and we may not speak about those topics the way men do in a more rational way, right? But we definitely we may not talk about these things in male spaces as much, but I think
Right.
we do actually talk about those things more than men. I disagree.
In my experience,
lot of-
I agree with you, Sophia, because in my experience in my family, the women of my family are the ones who are always talking about metaphysics and mystical experience. And that's
It's
my,
just that in Western societies, women are very like dismissed. You know, it's all
yeah,
chalked
it's
up to we're just
and usually
emotional.
the men in my family
beings.
don't sit around those tables to talk with them. It's usually all the women
Yeah.
when they get together, they talk about like my mom and her sister and my sister and my cousins. They'll all sit around if we're all at a family reunion or whatever, and they'll talk about these spiritual concepts. Meanwhile, my uncles, my dad, all the men in the family, they get together and they start drinking and smoking cigars and stuff. And what do they talk about? Politics. That's all
Or
they
the
want
game
to talk
on TV.
about. Or the game. Yeah,
It's always-
they're talking about the
men are
game
more-
or the politics.
Men are just more practical. Seems like they care about the practical things, the useful things, right? And a lot of times men approach women like that. What are you useful for? But they don't really care about the spiritual aspect or intuitive aspect of women. And a lot of times women are dismissed as if our, thought process is just irrational emotion and all this kind of stuff. So I would definitely disagree with that. But I will say there aren't many women in male spaces talking about these topics. I agree, but that's kind of because of men. I'm blaming men.
And that makes me the odd man out because I'm the kind of guy in my family, they know me as the one who talks about a lot about non-dualism and idealism and religion and that kind of stuff. I just get a lot of eye rolls. Like they don't really,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, whatever, Scott. Like, go talk to the women over there. You belong over there. Go to the kitty
And I'm
table.
also kind of the oddball out, being a woman, to trying to discuss these topics with a bunch of men, and so I do get a lot of backlash for that. Like, be quiet, woman. Get back to the kitchen.
Exactly. It's
So,
like
yeah,
even when I was Jehovah's Witness, one of the things we always try to make sure attendance was high, and so we'd always address attendance issues. And one of the things we realize is that one of the main reasons men go to the meetings and stuff is because their women drag them in there. They follow their woman.
Yeah.
It's mainly about the women. The women are the ones who are into it, but the men are kind of reluctantly there because they have to be. They'd rather be at home watching the game, or, you know what I mean? That's just the nature. That's just how I understood it. I don't know.
I mean, I would say it depends on what type of society you're in, but yeah, I would say in our society that's pretty common. Men are more about the practical things, they're not trying to philosophize, and they ain't trying to hear all that, like.
But it's so funny how the leaders of the churches, though, are all men.
Right?
How does that work? It seems like the women are the ones mainly interested in it. Then it seems like they should be the ones that are the teachers, because actually women are better teachers than men, in my opinion, in a lot of cases, in a lot of ways. Because you think about
I
it,
just think that
my first teacher was my mom. you know?
Right. I just think that women are naturally more intuitive than men. And I'm not trying to be here discriminate against men
No, I
here.
get it.
I think there's a biological component to that. How the female interface works versus the male interface. A woman goes through childbirth, right? And she bonds with a life that is growing inside of her before the baby is ever even seen. A woman feels that, you know? And then when the baby comes out, you're the first face the baby sees, and she's attuned with her infant. And, she has to pretty much sleep with both eyes open because she has to listen for her child and get up every 2 hours, and she's listening for every little sound, and I think in that way, women are just automatically, their interface is automatically built to be more intuitive. So I think that practicality comes in handy, right? The way men are very practical and logical. But at the end of the day, there needs to be some kind of middle that we need to come to periodically, right? You know what I mean? Where we come together on a more fundamental level other than practicality. And I think that's where a lot of the disconnect happens in our current society. You know what I'm saying? Am I making sense, y'all?
Yeah, and Eamon says, fair enough. I was answering one of Dave's comments. I know a lot of women are interested in spirituality, but they don't analyze these questions so much as a rule. That could be institutional bias.
Yeah, well, I think it's just, like I was saying to Scott the other day, like, people just don't accept certain terms. And when we talk about spirituality, there's so much negativity attached to that, and everybody has their own versions of it. And so when it comes to the like the only reason I really talk about it in these kind of frames the way that I do is because I guess I'm trying to prove something, right? I'm trying to prove that women aren't irrational. Spirituality is real within the frame of philosophy, the way that we're describing it. I'm trying to give a voice to it, and convey that it's very rational, that it's not irrational, through these discussions of metaphysics and talking about science and things. And I know a lot of women aren't doing that, but I think it's about damn time that we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it is kind of, it kind of has been where men are the final authority on these things, and I think that a lot of men ain't really on track, right? They rationalize things too much. And, we just talked about that just recently. You did a show on what's rational. I did a little segment on it. And so the question is, what is even rational? What qualifies as rational? Is it rational to believe that there's nothing unseen, even though we always work with unseen things, right? We don't know, we can't physically see gravity, but we know it exists based on inference. We work with anticipation before the facts physically present themselves all the time. And that is actually a skill that we develop through evolution for survival. So, discussing these things, my whole objective is to show that it is actually irrational to say something doesn't exist because you can't quantify it, right? And I think that a lot of women already think along those lines. We're just not really heard, so that's kind of
well, yeah, and there's a category that fits into that, which you think of being nurturing, like the quality of nurturing, emotionalism is in the same category as things like logical truths and possibilities, like modal possibilities. These are real features of reality but they cannot be reduced to physical states. Because logical, modal structures, love, qualia, they're inherently conceptual or mind-like. So if logical and modal structures are real, they require grounding. And the only coherent grounding, is going to be a mind-like reality is what's going to ground that stuff. And so women
and then when you
understand that intuitively, they may not express it in that way. And that's where men come in, and they sort of taking the lead there, like your Bernardo Kastrups and, you know, Nathan Hawkins and all of these philosophers and Alex O'Connors and people like that. They're giving voice to that, but women sort of just kind of know that, and they kind of operate from that.
Men have this need to rationalize things and express things very rationally, right? And then when you say the word emotionalism, you know, there's a difference between having emotions and emotionalism, but I think a lot of times women react very emotional because the men aren't really hearing them, right? And that's kind of the problem. And like you said, there needs to be something that's grounding, and it feels very ungrounding when you intuitively know something and you having this subjective experience, and then someone else basically dismisses your experience or reduces it to something that is so rational, and then make you look like you're so unrational just because you can't see it, right? And so there's a breakdown, and I think that me and you doing this show, it kind of shows that there can be balance, right, between a male and a female. And we demonstrate this all the time. You know, we can meet each other in the middle. And
What
that's
did you
kind
say?
of,
What did you say? I don't hear you. I don't hear you. You're a woman. No, I'm just kidding. No, yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's a good balance. And that's what we need is a good balance. And there's no, you know, the values are just different. It's not that one's better than the other. They're just different sort of tools and expressions.
Yeah. We have different qualities, different strengths, but that doesn't mean we need to be separate. We can come together and find the middle somewhere where we can come together and put those tools together and use them together, right? Like, I don't see what the big problem is. For me, that just seems natural. But apparently, we're living in a time where everything is divisive, and I don't know. It just is what it is.
Yeah, and also too, it's our culture, and which is, you know, or our language is a product of our culture. So there's a lot of cultural biases.
Bullshit.
A lot of bullshit going on. Yeah, because you know, people love to see differences and distinctions, and then we live in this scientific world of what can be verified scientifically is the only thing that really counts, which, you know, verification is self-refuting, because how do you scientifically verify verification? You know, it's like it's self-refuting, doesn't really work. And yeah, we just need to kind of come to grips with all that and strike a balance. And the only way we're really going to do it, though, is if we really come together and, you know, like the lady on there was saying, you know, we're converging. We're trying to converge. And Sadhguru was saying, that's great, you know, but there really is no getting together on that, because at the end of the day, you're always going to have people, contrarians out here that just want to always nitpick at the differences. And we're always going to see the differences. We're always going to operate from a, yeah, but how useful is it sort of point of view. And it's just really, you know.
I think what he's really saying comes down to self-respect, right? Because he's saying your process may sound all good and everything, but that's what you need to do to believe, right? That's what you need to do to validate your experience. I don't need that. So don't really bring that shit to me, right? So I think he's just he's having a boundary. He's making a boundary. He's saying, yeah, that's fine and dandy that you want to do this and everything, but I don't need your scientific process to prove reality to myself, right? That's kind of a you problem. And I think that's what he was basically saying.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I feel as a woman, having been through like failed relationships with males. I just got to the point where it's like, I don't need your validation. I don't need your rationality to reduce me to something that I'm not. I can't be tamed. I am a wild woman. And I don't mean that in a way of, oh yeah, I'm promiscuous and all this kind of stuff. No, I'm a free thinker. I'm intuitive, and you can't conquer me. You can't catch me. The only thing you can do is align with me. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And the minute you try to rationalize me, reduce me, and contain me, I act the fuck out. What can I say? And that's what Sadhguru is telling her. You can't contain me. You can't contain reality. You can't catch it. It's like catching the wind, right?
Right, exactly. And you can't just wait on our society and cultural establishments like academia to decide what you need to believe about reality and yourself. Like, there comes a point when you have to figure these things out as you go through. Otherwise, you're not living. You're just operating from what I can prove or what I can, it's like you're missing the whole point of life,
Right. You're
And
not
by the
even
way,
experiencing life. You're waiting for life to arrive and tell you that it's there. Like, you're missing out. You're missing out doing that.
Yeah, because I mean, think about if this convergence is true. Let's say science does converge on, some sort of non-duality or some sort of idea like that, consciousness and stuff. Well, just think about all the hundreds and hundreds of years where people were operating faithfully to science under the opposite. So you're saying they just wasted their lives because you misled them. You taught them opposite. Now you're changing your mind. And so now people have to change their mind. Well, what about the people who wasted their whole lives? It's kind of like religion. Like, I used to always say that about Jehovah's Witnesses. When I was a Jehovah's Witness, they used to always tell us God is revealing new light. So we'd have all these conventions where we go to learn the new light from Jehovah. And so one of the new light was, oh, now you can go ahead and take blood transfusions. So it's like, well, goddamn, what about all the hundreds and thousands of people who had to die following the church because blood transfusions were bad? And now they just changed their mind and said, oh, no, actually, we were wrong. You can, blood transfusions are fine. So now all those people died for nothing. You know what I mean? It's like bullshit. That's bullshit. It's like at some point you have to take responsibility for your own life. You can't wait on institutions to do it for you.
Or tell you how to be or how to think.
Yeah, exactly. This all makes a lot of sense. I agree. You shouldn't wait for validation from academia. That's what Sadhguru is always saying. Like, there was another one. He was with Steve Pinker, which is an atheist materialist neuroscience scientist, and his whole thing is he's very hard on, there is no. I think he's even one of those consciousness denier people or something like that. But he's definitely like, whatever this thing we call consciousness is, it emerges from the brain, and there is no free will, and there is no gods and there is no magic to life. It's all been described by science, and that's pretty much it. And I'd like to talk to Sadhguru, and he had all these assumptions about Sadhguru, like, oh, he dresses funny, he's calls himself a mystic, so that must means he believes in magic and gods and demons and all this kind of supernatural stuff. And during the whole thing,
that's a
it's
superiority complex.
yeah, and
I can't
Sadhguru was
stand
like,
that shit.
and he was like, dude, I don't believe in magic. I don't believe in miracles like that. I don't believe in God. I don't even have beliefs at all about these sort of things. I'm a mystic. And he's like, well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. You're a mystic. So and he's like, yeah, but
they
you
don't know
even
what it is.
Yeah, it's like you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
You don't know what the fuck a mystic is. That's the problem.
And it's like through the whole thing, no matter how many times it was repeated, he just kept on with that same assumption. And it's like he never got the message. And it's like, I think that people, once they make their mind up, that's it. Like, and these people are academics because that's the academic,
I
way
see
to
that as what is it called? Solipsism.
Yeah, solipsism. Yeah.
That's what it is, because you think that the way your logic works is how it ought to be, and that's the only right way to think. And it's kind of yeah, it's very narcissistic. It's like having a superiority complex, because you're running around defining things the way that what you think it means, and then you judge people based on what you think it means as if you are the authority. And I don't appeal to that stuff at all. I can't stand it, because for one, how are you going to say somebody's dressing funny? Based on what? Based on whose standards? Who makes those standards? And why do you think that your standard is the standard, right? And
well, see, that's just it.
up?
It's a cultural superiority. It's, so when he sees someone like a Sadhguru or some of these monks, like you can see even with these monks that are traveling around, like I was watching some of the Christian TikTokers this morning, and they're still on about these monks. And they're like, these people dress all weird and they have these beads and they're trying to push their demonic idolatry. But we Christians, we're just supposed to sit there and we're just supposed to take it. I guess we're not supposed to have a right. We don't have a right to speak our truth. We're just supposed to take their shit, and they get to walk around and push their bullshit on us and demonic. And we're just supposed to let America fall for this demonic messaging. And now you have all these people saying that the Christians are wrong for protesting. And it's like everybody's in it with these weirdos, but nobody wants to stand up for the truth anymore. And it's like, man, it's like, fuck, man. It's like, you hear yourself how superior you sound.
People like that need to be ignored, straight up ignored. Let them scream into the void,
Yeah.
Because
ejaculate into the void.
that shit's it's so dumb it hurts. I can't even deal with it.
Yeah, and Coach Renz, he's an atheist, and he has his own channel. We've had him on our channel before. And he had done a show the other day, and I was there. He was saying how actually the monks have taught me a whole lot about patience. He says, because I'm going to tell you right now, if I ever had any of these Christians come out and shout me down with a fucking bullhorn and all this shit and stalking me from town to town, same motherfucker stalking me, there's going to be a problem. I ain't going to be like them monks. It's going to be a goddamn problem. It's going to get physical, or else better yet, hopefully I'll have the state of mind to call the police and press charges, because that's stalking and something needs to be done with it. But he goes, but these monks are better men than me, because I don't see how they put up with half that bullshit.
For real.
Yeah, it's like, but you know, if the shoe was on the other foot, can you imagine? Like, if people were blowhorning and you know, bullhorn these fucking Christians, if they were doing anything like that, oh, we're being persecuted. We're being
Maybe we should
persecuted.
start doing that. Maybe we should start going into churches and shit and start preaching idealism and say stuff like, oh, this is the devil. This church worships Satan because it's really about consciousness. Let's just start doing that. Let's start going into all these churches and chase Christians down the street and shit. Watch how fast my ass get arrested.
Oh, hell yeah. You stand outside in front of one of these churches with a bullhorn. And, you know, like he was saying, you know, he goes, the thing about these fake Christians out here, they love to get in everybody's business. Like, they're just mad because they're not getting the attention. So
that's one of their main problems. They don't know how to mind their damn business.
You don't see them going to a strip club and doing all that shit. Like,
because
they
know
stay out of that.
There'd be a whole nother crowd there.
Yeah.
You know, monks and stuff are known to be very meek and humble, and that's the only reason they're doing that. You know, they know who to do it with. That's for sure. But they have essentially control issues, right? I think materialism in general, it gives you that sense of control. And idealism proposes basically that there's a very limited amount of free will, and these people who think they're superior, that shit just fucks them up. The thought of not being in control. But we're taught that every day in our lives. We know that we're going to die one day, right? And there ain't shit no one can do about that. So we know this. Why can't they just accept that, you know?
Yeah, they want that control. And, you know, and it used to be a critique from a lot of materialists until recently, you know, the transhumanist movement, where you're able to upload, you know, the idea of uploading your consciousness into a cloud, computer cloud infrastructure. And so now they're sort of turning that into a kind of religion. It used to be that, oh, we should just be at peace with the fact that we're going to die. And so this is why Christians are based on insecurity and just wishful thinking. And now look at them. Now they're saying, well, we've got the technology now to make it happen, so we're going to do it. But that's still wishful thinking, because there's nothing about that we know about consciousness that's computable or that can be uploaded or anything like that. So I don't understand how that's not wishful thinking at this point. It's just a theory and a hypothesis at best.
Yeah, that's all it is. Anyway, though, my phone is about to die, so I will have to bounce up out of here. Great show. Enjoyed myself.
I'm about to bounce myself. And I appreciate everybody that showed up and interacted. This was really fun. Nice with the interaction. And we will talk to you guys later on.